Our next speaker is Beverly Maunus. She was born in Yorkshire, England, and has lived in McKinney, Texas for the last 5 years. She's been married to her husband for 30 years, has 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren. She's the middle of 5 siblings. Raising her grandson Luke takes up a lot of her time. She also loves to encourage people in jail, and she loves to study. She also enjoys gardening, photography, cooking, and traveling to new places. Help me welcome Beverly.
All right. Hello. All right, here we go. The room was so dark that I could barely see the poster of Nadia Comaneci. She was my gymnastics hero, and I often, as I was going to sleep, would take a look at her on my wall. My sweaty hands shook as I placed them on my chest and felt my heart pounding as if it would truly explode. Terror gripped my mind and fear took over me. Was this it? Was I truly dying? Every night this horror had happened to me since the day that changed my life forever. I dreaded nighttime and the panic that came out of nowhere. I was actually terrified to go to sleep. I would spend hours wondering what death was like. Where did we go? And what did this life mean? Maybe I was dreaming and I would wake up and these last few months had never happened. I was 10 years old. I had 3 brothers and a sister, a mom and a dad, a pony named Candy. We lived in Yorkshire, England in a nice neighborhood with my school at the bottom of the street. I had a good friend that I had just met whose mom and dad were like parents to me. Life had been good until that one day, and now it felt like the color of life was just black. It had been a good day at school, and I came bouncing into the house and ran up to my bedroom to take my school uniform off and get into my play clothes. After changing, I walked into my parents' room with the blue flowered wallpaper and the big comfy bed. I sat at my mom's dressing table and I picked up the gold hairbrush and started to brush my long blonde hair. All of a sudden, I saw movement at the door. Looking into the mirror, I saw my dad walk in. He smiled and came over to me and asked me about my day. He put his hands on my shoulders and took the brush from my hand and slowly started to brush my hair. All of a sudden, his other hand went to my shoulder, and then it moved down my front and under my shirt. What was he doing? This couldn't be happening. Fear took over me. The room started to swirl, and everything in that moment changed. Everything that I knew to be true and right. Sorry. Tough. I went to a good school. I loved my school. It was an elementary school, and it was at the end of our street, and I had teachers that were actually wonderful. We had every morning when we went into the school, we would have kind of an assembly, and we would sing Christian songs, and it was the first time really that I'd even heard of God or really even understood what onward Christian soldiers really meant. But I loved to sing the hymns. I loved the Lord's Prayer that we would say before we left. I loved lunchtime when we would recite again the Lord's Prayer, and we would thank Jesus for the meal. This was all foreign to me. I didn't know the Lord, and I didn't grow up in a Christian home. One time I was sitting there in the assembly, and all of a sudden everything just started to swirl again. Everything just felt unreal, like it wasn't real, like it was a movie. And I just wanted to run. I wanted to get out of that place. I looked around and felt like everybody was looking at me, but nobody was looking at me. I just felt surreal, like this life that I was living was not really real. Should I run? Should I stay? The panic just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And my heart was pounding. I mean, just never stopped. It got faster and faster and faster. And I kept looking to see where the exit was. And then I would close my eyes and just wonder if there was something else in this life that would take the pain and the fear away. One of the teachers started to pay an interest in me. He was a wonderful teacher, and he started a gymnastics club, and it actually changed my life. It was something that I was good at and something that I look forward to every day. He started a club, and I started to go and really started to get some confidence that I had never really had. I got much better, and this club now, I outgrew it and needed to go to another club. So I had to take 2 buses across town after school to this new club. And one evening I was sitting at home, and I got a phone call from this coach, and he said that we had a gymnastic meet the next day, and that I needed to leave school early and go to the gym. So the next day at school, I ended up leaving early. I took the 2 buses, I came to the gym, and there I was greeted by the coach. His name was Harry Tate. I climbed the steps up to the gym, and he was with me. And all of a sudden, he looked at me and he said, "This is the day that your life is going to change." And all of a sudden, it took me back to what was happening to me at home every night. That this teacher, this karate teacher, this gymnastic teacher, tried to take my clothes off, and I chased him around, and he chased me around the gym, and I remember smacking him across his face and running as fast as I could. I remember running so fast all the way home, which was miles and miles. I remember running down a railroad track and not even caring if the train ran me over. I got home, I went upstairs and laid in my bed, and then it all started over again. At 16, I was done with school. In England, unless you go off to grammar school, you can be done with school. And I had signed up to be to go to this college, High Milton College, to be a sports psychologist. And I was all ready to go. I used to help my sister on the weekends at this lighting store, and I used to get the gymnastic magazine every month. And I was sitting there one weekend before I went off to college, and I saw a little ad in the magazine, and it said gymnastic teacher wanted to coach gymnastics in Germany. And I couldn't believe it. This was my ticket out of the country that I lived in and away from all the bad that was going on. So in those days, there wasn't the computer or email or any of that. I actually had to write a letter, and I made a copy of my certificate. I actually turned to coaching because I grew too tall, and I sent my certificate off and a letter saying that I would love to take on this job. A few weeks later, I got a letter back saying the job is mine if I want to go. So I just couldn't believe it. I was so excited. I remember telling my dad that I'd got a job in Germany coaching gymnastics, and he said, "Absolutely not, you're not going." And I said to him, "I'm going." And I was adamant that this was something that I was going to do. So he said, "Okay, you can go, but I am going to come with you." So we took the bus, we took the train, and it was on the train that my dad said to me, I was 17, and he said to me, "Just pretend I'm your husband. If anybody asks, I'm your husband." And I remember just thinking, there's something really wrong with you. So I got to Germany, and I would actually be coaching on a American Air Force base. And this was the first time really that I'd really seen guys, and there was a lot of really good looking guys in uniforms. And my life just got a whole lot bigger. After 3 days of my dad staying with me and me staying with another gymnastic coach where I would be staying, he said that I needed to come back home. And I said absolutely not, that I would be staying. So he knew that I was not going to argue with him. He gave me $20, and I had my little bag, and my life had just begun. What I didn't realize was what a mess I was. I had been sexually abused not only by my dad, but by a gymnastic coach, by a karate instructor. I had 3 brothers, 2 of which made a point of coming into my room in the middle of the night or waiting for me in the living room naked while they masturbated when I walked in. So I really didn't realize until I left home just the mess that I was. The first person that I met was a guy who was twice my age. He was a helicopter pilot in the Air Force. He was very handsome and very handsome in his flight suit. And we kind of hit it off, and before I knew it, I had moved in with him. Before I knew it, I was pregnant, and before I knew it, I was being taken to a doctor's office early one morning. An IV was put in my arm, and I woke up, and I wasn't pregnant anymore. I was told that this was just a clump of cells, that there wasn't a baby, that there was no life, but I couldn't understand why I felt so sad and why I cried for a few days. I envisioned my life with this guy and a family with him. After living with him for about a year, one day he came to me and said that I would have to move out and that he would get an apartment for me, that his wife would be coming over.
Yeah.
He had a wife in another country and she was going to be coming over. He thought it was perfectly fine for the two of us to continue to be a couple. I told him otherwise. Going further on, at 20, I was living with my husband. I met another guy, the first guy really that came along after him. I was desperate for love. I was desperate for a man to show me attention, and I confused sex with love, and attention from a man is all I desired. So I married the first guy after this guy that came along. He was in the Air Force. He got stationed in Colorado, and it ended up again just being a nightmare. He was an alcoholic. He cheated on me within a year of us being married, and in fact I had gotten a job at the base coaching gymnastics just a few times a week. At this time we had a daughter who was 1, and I was coming back from coaching gymnastics with my daughter one day, and the lady who watched my daughter at the gym dropped me off. I didn't have a driver's license. I hadn't learned to drive yet, and I was 20 years old, and I climbed the stairs to the apartment. We lived on the 3rd floor, and I opened the apartment door, and fear and panic came back again because there was nothing in the apartment, just a few odd things, and a note on the counter. The note said that he didn't want to be married anymore. He'd had enough and wanted a new life. I put my daughter down and just sat there and wondered what I was going to do. I was thousands of miles away from home. I had no family, I had no friends, and a 1-year-old daughter. I put my daughter to bed that night and sat on the floor and just cried. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't have any money, and I really didn't have any skills. About 9 o'clock that night, the doorbell rang, and I was scared because nobody knocked on my door at night, especially 9 o'clock at night. I opened the door, and it was my neighbor, Ron. He was a 30-something guy that was going through a divorce that we shared pleasantries with, but that was about it. He also was a Christian, and I knew that about him. He just seemed different than anybody else that I knew, but I was wondering why he was at my door at 9 o'clock that night. He was holding a Bible, and I was curious as to why he was coming on this night. How did he know what was going on? Well, he quickly told me that my ex-husband had left a message on his voicemail that he was leaving me, and that would he check on me. So I invited him in, and we sat on the floor, and he started to read the Bible to me. He asked me if it was okay, and I told him I'd never heard the Bible being read before, but I had nothing to lose, so go ahead and read the Bible. As he was reading the Bible, the fear, the panic, everything that I had felt for the last several hours of finding out that my husband was gone went away. Peace and calm filled my heart, filled my mind, filled the room. I just couldn't understand what was going on. I'd never felt anything like this before. And I was really overwhelmed with just the feeling of calmness and the feeling of peace and just the love that was coming out of this man that really didn't know me, but whatever it was so big that even then I hadn't really come to know what the Bible was about, but just hearing the words had power and changed me that night. I told him I wanted to know more, and would he tell me more? And he said that I could go to church with him that weekend. So that night as I lay in bed, I remember thinking back to when I was 10 and my dad had abused me, and I remember looking out my window down the street and wondering, is this all there is to life? Just really wondering, is this it? And when I thought back to that time when I was 10 and wondering if there was more to life than what there was, I knew then, right then, that there was more to life. That whatever was in this book that he was reading was real. It had power. It had the power to not only change the atmosphere in my home, but it changed me. I lay in bed and I remember just not feeling alone anymore. That there was something out there, and I really wanted to know more. I went to church with him that weekend, and I heard a pastor speak about a God that loved us, that gave his son to die on a cross for us, that shed his blood, and that we were all sinners, that we had all messed up, that we'd all done things that didn't please him, but he loved us no matter what, even despite that, and even when we were still sinning and we were still messing up, that he loved us. He asked us, does anybody want to give their life to the Lord? Is there anybody here that wants to put their trust and their faith in him? And my hand shot up so fast. I wanted this more than anything, and I wanted it more than anything in my life. So I prayed the prayer, and I asked the Lord to come into my life. I asked him to forgive all of my sins, and that I would trust him for the rest of my life. I would follow him. And I left that place that night, that church, and I went back home. And even though I was by myself and it was just me and my daughter, I prayed and prayed that my husband would come back. And 6 weeks later, he came back. He walked through the door and said he was sorry. And it would be easy for me to say that we lived happily ever after. That didn't happen. The unfaithfulness happened again, and the alcoholic rages happened again. He raped me one night, and I got pregnant and had a miscarriage. And a few nights after that, he had left again. I ended up asking him if he would come back just for a week because I needed to check myself into a hospital. I had been having terrible, terrible panic attacks as I lay at night. Even though I now knew the Lord, I just felt that it was almost like now I had the Lord and I wasn't alone, and it was okay now to get help. The panic and the fear that I had from when I was a little girl came back in vengeance. I kept seeing pictures of my dad in my head, flashbacks of him and the things that he had done to me, as well as all the other people that had taken advantage of me. And I went to the hospital, to the psychiatric hospital, and I checked myself in. I didn't want to live this way anymore. I wanted to be healed. I wanted to be well. I wanted to give my daughter a better life. I wanted her to have a good mom, and not one that was too afraid to go outside because she didn't feel real anymore. That the panic and the fear and the anxiety kept her from living the life that she was meant to live. I wanted something different. I wanted to be whole. I wanted to be healed. So I spent 6 days in a psychiatric hospital. I met a therapist that said that actually that she specialized in sexual abuse victims, and I had told her I wasn't a victim, that I didn't like that name. And I remember her laughing and saying, "You're a victor, you're not a victim." She apologized for that. I ended up seeing her for 4 years, every week, sometimes twice a week, until she said to me, when I told her that I didn't need to do what she was telling me to do, that I would just pray. And she would tell me that's magical thinking. And I said, it's not magical thinking, and that it works. And now the prayer and my reading the word was all I needed. I didn't need therapy. God was healing me. God was making me whole again. I didn't trust people. That was the big thing that I had come to know about myself. I didn't trust anyone with my daughter. I was always wondering, if they had other motives, and that was one of the big things that I had to go to the Lord with, was to help me to trust. What he did was he helped me to trust him. He answered all my prayers and just completely changed my life. A few years after this, my brothers and my sister were having children in England, and I felt a responsibility that this would not happen. What happened to me wouldn't happen to them. So I booked a flight and went home, and my mom and dad at the time had been married 30 years, and I confronted my dad, and I told him what he had done to me was wrong, and what he had done to me caused a lot of harm and a lot of pain. And my mother didn't know, and she threw herself to the floor and was hysterical. And I remember just looking at my dad and feeling sorry for him. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt just a deep sadness that this man, how could he live with himself? The guilt that he must feel of doing what he had done to me, and not just me and my sister. And really out of nowhere, because it wasn't something that I planned, the words came out. Dad, I forgive you for the harm that you've caused me, and the pain that you've caused me. I forgive you. And he said there wasn't forgiveness for him, and that he was going to go kill himself. So he left, and I didn't see him again. I flew back home, and 2 years went by, and I'd not heard anything from him. And then one morning I was sitting at home drinking a cup of tea and reading the word, and my phone rang, and it was my dad. And he said, Bev, I'm so sorry, but I want what you have. I know when you've come back before and you brought your Bible and I threw it across the room and I told you not to bring it in my home, and you wanted that, but I've seen something in you that I want. You have love and you have joy and you have a peace. I want that. So I told him about this God that had saved me, that had loved me, that had healed me, that had changed me, that had made me not desire men anymore, and sex, that wasn't real love. That was a fake love, and that was a love that didn't heal. That was a love that destroyed and brought more pain. This was a love that truly changed us from the inside, that when you even taste it, you want to live the rest of your life wanting more and more and more. My dad invited Christ into his heart over the phone, and he asked me over and over again, are you sure I'm washed as white as snow? And I said, Dad, you're washed as white as snow. We hung up, and I just fell on the floor, and I remember just crying and thanking God that who are you, God, that you can do this, that you can make me somebody that couldn't even go out of my house or drive a car because I was riddled with pain and anxiety and panic, and that you can just give me the courage to forgive this man that spent so many years hurting me. And yet I had no anger. I had no hostility towards him. Now he was actually my brother in Christ, and I loved him. God said that he was his child too, and I knew that he was. I ended up speaking to all of my brothers and my sister and everybody that had hurt me and everybody that I knew in England, and they all came to know the Lord. Even now, my nephews and nieces. And I married a few years after this a man that has just been my rock. He proved my dad wrong, because my dad told me at 17 that all men would cheat on me. My husband never cheated on me. He helped raise my 2 daughters, and then we have a daughter together too. He's been with me for 30 years. After a few years of being married to my husband, we moved to Florida, and we joined a small church. And it was in this church that I grew so much, and I had a hunger for the Lord. And I remember just praying for 3 years, God, use me, use what the enemy meant for evil, turn it to good. And he did. 3 years after I prayed that prayer, a little card came in the mail, and it said, volunteers wanted to serve a Christmas dinner to children in jail. And I actually thought the print was wrong, that there wasn't children in jail. I called the number, and the lady said, oh, we have 200 prisons here in Florida with children in them. I said, well, sign us up. Me and my husband are coming. So we went, and we walked into this room, and there was 30 girls from the ages of 8 to 17 in blue jumpsuits, prison jumpsuits. I looked around the room, and every single one of them had the saddest eyes. They had no hope. And I knew that those years of praying for God to use me, he was going to use me right here in this jail. After leaving there and hugging every girl, I said, I want to come back. And they said, there's a church, some Bible ladies that come every Thursday. So I called the number, and I said, I want to come, but please don't ask me to teach. I don't know my Bible well enough. And she said, that's fine. I said, I just want to love on them and get to know them. So for 3 months, I faithfully went every Thursday, drove the hour up there and the hour back, and it was the highlight of my week. I loved it more than anything. I spoke to every girl as if they were me. I saw myself in them. And I told them about Jesus, and I told them about how much he loved them. After 3 months of going up, I came up this one Thursday. And actually, even getting up there was so hard, because every Thursday something would happen. This Thursday I drove up, and it was up a big highway, and a truck in front of me with a big ladder on the truck thing. All of a sudden the ladder flew off, and it was coming straight for my windshield. And I swerved, otherwise it would have come and probably killed me. And I remember pulling off to the side and shaking and going, oh my gosh, I nearly died. And I just kept going. And I got there, and I walked into the room, and the ladies weren't there. They were always there. And I asked one of the guards, where are the ladies? And she said, oh, they're not coming anymore. They've pulled out. And I said, what do you mean they've pulled out? And she said, they're not coming anymore. It's just you. And I said, oh, well, I can't do this. I don't know my Bible. I can't teach these girls. And she said, well, they're already lining up. They're all yours. So I remember just walking down these hallways, getting beat through, and in my mind I'm praying to God, God, help me, I can't do this. And I heard his voice say, tell them your story. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't have a story. And I was actually arguing with him the whole way to the thing. What story? Tell them your story. So I get in the room, and we have 4 guards in each room, and then 30 girls. And I said, well, today's going to be different. And it was almost like God just took over me. I was not scared anymore. I wasn't afraid. He just spoke through me. He told them we didn't have music, we didn't have snacks, but we were going to do something a little different. I was going to tell them my story. And we all sat in a circle, and out of my mouth just came of the abuse, not in detail because these were 8-year-old girls and up to 17, but enough for them to know my story and what I had gone through. I told them about the panic attacks and how I couldn't even leave my house, and how it, just all of it. And I looked at all of them, and they were all crying. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand why they were crying. I just was like, what? Why are they crying, Lord? And they all told me that they too had been sexually abused. And I knew then that's why God had me in there. That they needed to hear somebody else had gone through what they had gone through, but was standing up, that was living a good life, that was married, that had children, and could now minister to them. And they asked me, it was almost like, I can't even explain, but his love just poured out to them. All I wanted to communicate was how much he loved them. I'd never felt a love like this. And it really, for the rest of my life, I just know how much he loves us. Because of the love, it wasn't my love, it was his love. And that's what I went to communicate to them. They all raised their hands. They all, 30 of them, accepted the Lord that night as their Savior. I remember leaving and winding my windows down when we could wind our windows down in the car. And I drove the hour home, and I remember just screaming, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you, God. Thank you, God." That started 12 years of jail ministry in Florida and Indiana. Even when I really didn't want to do it anymore, God, just when I didn't think I had the strength, and when I had my own daughters and trouble with them and trouble with life, that even when we do know the Lord, it doesn't mean our lives are going to be perfect anymore. It just means that we'll have Him with us when life's not perfect anymore. There's so much more I could say, but there's just not enough time to tell you. My dad is now in heaven, I can tell you that. I talk to my mom every day or every other day. I've forgiven her too, for even though she said she didn't know, I questioned that, but I've given it to the Lord, and I love her, and I feel like she did the best that she could with what she had. I just put life is hard and we don't need to travel it alone. God took my shame, my fear, my anxiety, my lack of trust, my sin, and so many other things, and exchanged them for freedom. If God can truly radically change me and give me a life that I only dreamed about, He can certainly do the same for you. Don't wait. When we die, we can choose to spend eternity with God or without Him. And would you choose a relationship with God through Christ right now? And if you say yes, I will lead you in a prayer. I'll never forget, I was praying for one of my daughters who, I didn't know if she would live. She was addicted to drugs and just spent a lifetime, it seemed like a lifetime, on the wrong path. I remember laying on my floor, just sobbing, and again, calling out to God. And I remember just speaking over and over again, Yeshua, Yeshua, Yeshua. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what those words were. I remember for a few days after that saying to myself, I have to find out what those words mean, because they just kept coming and coming. It was really all I'd said. And when I found out, it was Yahweh, it's Jesus. I just couldn't believe that He just reveals Himself to us. He prays when we can't pray. He is my life now. I have never gotten over what He has done in my life. I've never gotten over it. I'm more hungry today for Him than I was back then. I could live in my Bible every day from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. I just want you to know that you are loved more than you could ever imagine. I've never gotten over this love and spend my days, like I said, just wanting to know Him more today than I did yesterday. I'm a chaplain, and I go into the jails here in Texas, and again, just wanting to tell everyone I meet, including the people in jail, because He loves them. I think He actually loves them extra. I don't think that's true after reading my Bible, but the love that I feel when I'm there for them, I know is His love for them. And I'll spend the rest of my life telling anybody and anyone that hears me how much He loves them, and that His love, it never fails. Oh Lord, I ask that you would cause all who are listening to my testimony to know the truth, because this truth will set them free. John 8:32. And then one more thing. I know I could go on and on, because I could speak for the rest of my life about what He has done for me and in me and through me. But one of the things that I know is that God is my shield. He doesn't offer me a shield. He is my shield. He will protect me. He will fight my battles for me. He has done. If anyone attacks me, they are really attacking Him. My battles are His. I put on Him as my full armor. And when I go into battle, He will fight for me. I will stand aside and let Him do it. His hand has been with me all through my life, starting in that bedroom when I was 10 years old, and it continues today. I'm an ordinary person, but I have encountered an extraordinary God, and so can you. I pray that as you read God's word and pray to Him, that you too will have an encounter with the living God. May He reveal more of Himself to you. May His words come alive in you with fire and power. May they bring light and revelation and confession that God truly has spoken to your heart. And may you have a fresh transfusion of the pure and holy, life-giving blood of Jesus. He is real, and He loves you.
Oh.